I learned very young that some children are born into love, while others, like me, are born into obligation. My earliest memories of my parents are not of warm embraces or bedtime stories, but of closed doors, hushed arguments, and the faint echo of my name spoken like a burden. My father was a businessman, the kind who lived more in airports and boardrooms than in his own home. My mother was a woman obsessed with appearances, porcelain skin, curated smiles, dinner parties where she pretended to be the perfect hostess and pretended I didn't exist. I was the uncomfortable truth she never wanted on display. I remember once, when I was 7, I walked into her dressing room, holding a picture I had drawn in school. Our family standing under a tree, smiling. I had colored her dress purple, because she always wore purple to her parties. "Mom, look," I said, eager for even the smallest acknowledgement. She didn't even turn around. "Not now." She sighed, as if I'd interrupted something far more important than her reflection in the mirror. The paper slipped from my hands. She didn't notice. That was how life felt. Me slipping through the cracks while they carried on as if I were invisible. But my grandfather, he was different. The day he first picked me up from school, I had been crying quietly in the playground, too ashamed to call home again. My parents forgot about me often. I sat alone on the swing, watching other kids run to their smiling mothers. Then a familiar voice called my name. "Where are your parents?" he asked gently. I shrugged, wiping my eyes.
"Busy."
He didn't look surprised. He simply took my hand and said, "Well, then I suppose you're coming with me." And just like that, I felt chosen. Wanted. Sin. He took me for ice cream and told me stories. Funny ones, philosophical ones. Stories of his youth and mistakes and triumphs. He told me I was brilliant, that I asked better questions than most adults he knew. With him, I wasn't an inconvenience. I was important. Those visits became my lifeline. Every time he came, the house brightened. Even my mother stood straighter when she heard his footsteps. She respected his money, even if she resented his love for me. He'd always take me out, never staying long enough for my parents to pretend affection, never giving them a chance to ruin the moments we had together. As I grew older, he became the mentor my parents never bothered to be. He taught me more than textbooks ever could. How to read people, how to stand up for myself, how to value my own worth. When I turned 16, he took me out to the pier, just the two of us watching the sunset paint the water orange. "You trust me?" he asked suddenly. "With everything," I replied without hesitation. He nodded, his expression serious in a way I rarely saw. "Good. Then let me protect you from what this world, and your parents, might try to take from you." I didn't fully understand, but I trusted him. I always had. Looking back, I realize he had been planning my safety long before I understood the danger. Maybe he knew my parents better than I did. Maybe he saw the greed simmering beneath their polished surfaces. Years passed like this, with my grandfather shaping me quietly, while my parents ignored me loudly. I moved in with him for college, and for the first time in my life, I lived in a home where the air wasn't thick with disappointment. Then the day came, a phone call, a tremble in my hands, and a world suddenly emptier. My grandfather was gone, and the only person who had ever loved me had left me everything. Everything, and a storm I never saw coming. Grief has a strange way of stretching time. Days felt like weeks after my grandfather's death. I walked through the world in a haze, my heart heavy, my mind drifting back to every moment we'd shared. The house, his house, was too quiet. Too still. Every creak of the floorboards reminded me he wasn't there, to say my name with that warmth only he had. The reading of the will was supposed to be a simple formality, done quietly in his study with his long, trusted lawyer, Mr. Hawthorne. I didn't expect my parents to come. They hadn't visited him in years. They hadn't visited me, either. So when they arrived, dressed in mourning clothes that still held the price tags tucked inside. I felt something cold twist in my stomach. My mother was the first to speak. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, voice dripping with fabricated sorrow. "What came as soon as we heard." She reached for me, but I stepped back. Her smile faltered, but only for a moment. A mask always needs adjusting. My father cleared his throat, pretending grief. "Your grandfather meant a lot to us." I almost laughed. He had meant nothing to them. Not his kindness, not his wisdom, not even his existence, until now. Mr. Hawthorne didn't bother with small talk. He opened the will, adjusted his glasses, and read clearly, "To my beloved grandchild, who has been my greatest pride, I leave the entirety of my estate." Silence. That single line hit the room like a thunderclap. My mother blinked rapidly, as if she thought she misheard. "All of it," she whispered, her voice thin. My father leaned forward. "There must be a mistake." Mr. Hawthorne looked at him coolly. "There is no mistake." And my parents' faces shifted, grief morphing into disbelief, disbelief melting into greed sharpened by years of entitlement. "But we're his children," my mother snapped. "Biologically," Mr. Hawthorne replied calmly. "Emotionally? Financially? Legally? No." I almost felt bad for the lawyer. Almost. My father stood abruptly. "This is ridiculous. He would never leave us nothing." But he had. And deep down, they knew why. They left without another word. But not without a final glare. One that promised retaliation. It didn't take long. 2 weeks later, the doorbell rang. A courier handed me a thick envelope. I already knew what it was before I opened it. A lawsuit. Filed by my own parents. They accused me of manipulating my grandfather, claiming I coerced him into rewriting his will. They demanded half the inheritance. At minimum. The document said, as if generosity lived somewhere in their ambition, poisoned hearts. For the first time in years, I felt the old childhood ache return, the feeling of being unwanted, unloved, seen only as an inconvenience. Except now, I wasn't an inconvenience. I was a jackpot. That night, I sat at my grandfather's desk, fingers trembling over the papers. Anger burned behind my grief. After everything, the years of neglect, the cold shoulders, the silence, they dared to try to take what I earned through loyalty, love, and suffering. Mr. Hawthorne called me early the next morning. "Don't worry," he said. "Your grandfather prepared for this. He knew they might try something." "What do we do?" I asked. "We fight," he answered simply. "You're more protected than you realize." Still. Nothing prepared me for what he said next. "The judge assigned to this case. He knew your grandfather." "Very well." Something in his voice hinted at secrets yet to be revealed. The court date was set for a Monday morning. All weekend, my parents texted me, alternating between threats and sugary promises. "We can settle this privately. You owe us. You think you're better than us. We'll ruin you if you don't cooperate." I ignored every message. By the time Monday arrived, my anxiety had hardened into something else. Resolve. Strength. A quiet, simmering fury that felt strangely empowering. As I put on my suit in the mirror, I heard my grandfather's voice echo in my memory. "Let me protect you from what this world, and your parents, might try to take." He had known. And now I would see why. The courtroom awaited, and with it, a truth no one expected. The courthouse smelled like old paper and colder decisions. As I walked through its marble halls, my footsteps echoed too loudly, betraying the nerves twisting inside my stomach. I clutched my briefcase a little too tightly, reminding myself to breathe. I wasn't afraid of losing the money. I was afraid of facing them, my parents, on a battlefield where the truth finally had a voice. I pushed open the double doors to the courtroom. My parents were already there. My mother sat with her legs crossed, perfectly composed, wearing an expensive black dress that screamed sympathetic widow. despite the fact she'd barely spoken to my grandfather while he was alive. She looked at me and rolled her eyes dramatically, as if I were inconveniencing her by defending myself against her lawsuit. My father leaned back confidently in his chair, hands steepled, a smirk on his face. He thought he had already won. Greed gave him that kind of delusion. My lawyer, Mr. Hawthorne, nodded reassuringly from our table. "Remember," he whispered as I sat down beside him, "your grandfather didn't raise a victim." I felt the words settle deep inside me like armor. Then the door behind the bench opened, and the judge walked in. He was an older man with silver hair and a stern expression. He carried an air of authority that made the room fall silent instantly. I stood as required, eyes down, until he said, "You may be seated." But when I lifted my gaze, I found him staring directly at me. Really staring. His eyes widened a fraction. He blinked, leaned forward, then looked down at the case file before him. He flipped a page, then another, his brows climbing higher. Finally, he cleared his throat. "Wait," he said slowly, looking between me and my parents. "The charges are against you." My mother let out a loud sigh, annoyed. "Yes, Your Honor. Our child manipulated his own grandfather." He held up a hand to silence her, gaze locked on me. "This young person." He looked baffled, disbelieving. My father frowned. "Is something wrong?" The judge exhaled, sitting back in his chair with a look of astonishment. "I knew your grandfather," he said. "To me, not them. Very well." And my parents flinched at that. He continued, voice softer now. "Edwin Carlisle was one of my oldest clients. He spoke of his hair often." My heart stuttered. My grandfather had talked about me, to a judge, to someone this important. He flipped another page, then asked, "Are you the individual he referred to as the protected hair?" A hush fell over the room. I nodded. Shock rippled across my mother's face. Real shock, not the theatrical kind. My father shifted in his seat, suddenly uncertain. The judge's expression turned grave. "Your grandfather petitioned years ago for legal measures to safeguard you. Precautions. In case your parents attempted to access his estate through coercion or manipulation." He looked at them. And it appears his fears were well founded. My mother's mouth fell open. "That's ridiculous," she snapped. "He favored them unfairly." "Mrs. Carlisle," the judge said sharply, "I have in front of me documentation your father submitted, explaining why he created a separate legal identity for his hair." My father's head whipped toward me. What?" "Yes," the judge continued. "Your child's legal and financial identity was placed under protection at age 16. A precaution triggered only if foul play occurred. It felt surreal watching their confidence crumble." Mr. Hawthorne rose smoothly. "Your Honor, we would also like to submit additional evidence." The judge nodded. One by one, documents were laid out for the court. Financial statements showing my parents stole from my grandfather years ago. Emails where they pressured him to change his will. A recorded conversation in which my grandfather admitted he feared what they would do to me. A sealed court record proving they once tried to declare me mentally unfit so they could control HI's wealth. My mother's face drained of color. My father's hand began to tremble on the table. The judge looked at them with open disgust. "This," he said, "is fraud, coercion, and attempted exploitation of your own child." My parents stammered weak excuses, but it was too late. The truth had spoken louder than their lies. And as I sat there, for the first time in my life, I felt something new. I was no longer powerless. I was the heir my grandfather knew I could be. The courtroom felt different after the truth came out. The air seemed clearer, colder, like the storm had passed, but left behind a chill that warned of consequences still unfolding. My parents, once so confident, now sat stiff and pale, their lawyers whispering urgently beside them. Their arrogance had cracked, and through the fractures, Fear seeped out. The judge's gavel struck once, echoing like the final toll of a bell. "This case," he declared firmly, "is hereby dismissed. The defendants," he looked at my parents with simmering disappointment, "have provided not a shred of credible evidence. Instead, we have overwhelming proof of their own misconduct." My mother inhaled sharply as if struck. My father's jaw clenched, a muscle twitching beneath his skin. The judge wasn't finished. "In fact," he continued, "this court is obligated to forward the evidence of fraud, attempted extortion, and prior financial manipulation to the district attorney's office. An investigation will follow." If silence had weight, it would have crushed the room. My mother finally broke. "Why, you can't do that?" "We're his parents." Her voice cracked in a way I'd never heard before. It was desperation, not maternal concern, but a predator cornered. The judge's stare hardened. "You are adults who attempted to exploit your own child. Biology does not absolve cruelty." My father jolted to his feet. "This is outrageous!" "Wait. Sit down," the judge snapped, voice booming with authority. My father obeyed. Mr. Hawthorne leaned toward me, whispering, "He's using every legal inch your grandfather gave him. This is what protection looks like." And in that moment, I realized something my grandfather had been fighting for me long before the battle ever began. The judge continued reviewing documents, each word he spoke tightening the noose around my parents' schemes. He ordered their financial records to be frozen pending investigation. Their assets would be reviewed, their transactions audited. There was talk of potential charges: fraud, coercion, embezzlement. Every sentence felt like justice settling into place. Finally, the judge looked at me, really looked at me. "You have been through more than anyone your age should endure," he said. "Your grandfather made it clear you were his pride. Carry that forward, not the shadows your parents cast." I swallowed hard, my throat thick with emotion I didn't want to break into tears in front of them. "Yes, Your Honor," I managed. He nodded softly. "You may go." I stood. My parents did too, but not to leave. They stared at me, defeated yet still trying to gather whatever scraps of control they believed they had left. My mother's eyes were wet, but not with remorse, only loss. "You did this to us," she whispered. I met her gaze steadily. "No, you did this to yourselves." My father stepped forward, anger pushing past humiliation. "We brought you into this world. You owe us respect." A bitter smile curled onto my lips. "You brought me into this world, but you never once acted like parents while I lived in it." And then I turned my back on them. My footsteps echoed across the courtroom floor, each one feeling like a small release of the weight I had carried my entire life. As I reached the doors, I paused. Not for them, but for myself. This was the last time they would ever have power over me. Outside, sunlight poured over me like a blessing. The sky was clear, almost impossibly blue. I inhaled deeply, letting the world fill my lungs with something my childhood had lacked: freedom. I didn't go home right away. Instead, I drove to the cemetery. The same road my grandfather and I used to travel together. The wind rippled through the trees, whispering like an old friend telling me I was almost there. I knelt beside his grave and placed my hand on the smooth stone. "They can't touch me," I said softly. "You protected me. Even now." For a moment, I swear the air warmed around me, as if he were there, proud and unyielding as ever. I closed my eyes. "I'll live well. I'll live honestly. I'll live the way you taught me to." The weight of the court, the lawsuit, the betrayal, it all melted away. What remained was strength. My strength. His strength in me. When I stood up to leave, the world felt different, wide open and waiting. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't walking toward fear or survival. I was walking toward a future that was finally, beautifully, undeniably mine.